which the Apostle Paul himself took upon, but rather someone himself gave it to him. And this is clear when Paul says in Galatians chapter 1:18 that I was acquainted with the knowledge by Peter, who was Jesus' closest disciples. And according to these scholars, the oral creed originates from Peter and James. Peter and James were two of the closest disciples of Jesus that buried his dead body in the ground. What more evidence do you want?
Have you finished your answer?
No, I'm not finished yet. And like I said, does he apply to the same standard to other points of history? So for example, was Pontius Pilate the governor of Judea? Or these other first century, he doesn't. The reason why he doesn't believe in the historicity of the crucifixion is based off a book 600 years after, where a man who was possessed by the demon, which is what I believe, told him this.
You believe?
Was it necessary to bring this caveat? A man who's possessed by the demon, what emotional response are you trying to entice? This is not a civilized behavior. If you want to discuss crucifixion, don't bring, oh, he was possessed by whatever. Shame on you. Now, to answer your points, I asked contemporary evidence. So you are saying Corinthians, and you are suggesting to me Corinthians was written by Paul, if I'm not mistaken. And Paul didn't actually witness it himself, so he wasn't a contemporary first-hand witness. He got it from Peter and James. Sorry, that doesn't count as contemporary first-hand.
So you don't accept the testimony of Jesus'
You're not
two
listening.
closest
I have not
disciples?
finished. I have not finished.
Let him finish and then you say. Otherwise we're not going to get nowhere.
You have no first-hand witness of anyone saying, I saw it and they've written it. You have Paul saying, oh, I got it from X, Y, Z. They have witnessed the crucifixion. That, to me, is not a direct evidence, right? This is a crucial matter because your whole religion, correct me if I'm not mistaken, your whole religion revolves around the death and crucifixion of Christ. That means the standard of evidence needs to be very, very high. What you're bringing, instead of saying, this is the writing of Peter, who witnessed crucifixion, this is the writing of James, who witnessed crucifixion, you're giving me Paul, who didn't even meet Jesus in his lifetime. He's a self-appointed, self-declared individual who says, I have received revelation from Christ. We don't consider people who haven't even seen Christ, and someone says, I know everything Christ said. Christ gave me all these things to me. So what you have is not a first-hand evidence. You have second, third evidence. Do you have anything first-hand to provide? I'm offering you again the chance to an opportunity. Okay. Anything first-hand.
Okay. I quoted an oral creed that was passed on from the disciples of Jesus, then which the Apostle Paul recorded in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, which is accepted by the majority of biblical scholars. These two disciples, which the oral creed comes from, buried Jesus' dead body. What kind of evidence do you want? Give me contemporary evidence of Muhammad splitting the moon. Same standard. Give me contemporary evidence.
Yeah, but that's another issue.
So now we are debating crucifixion.
If you apply that same criteria to the life,
you're not debating, brother. 1 minute.
No, you're not debating. We're not talking. Don't heckle. Please don't heckle. We are not heckling.
We're not talking about profit now.
Thank you very much. Now, so now as you've realized, he's saying...
What did he say?
He's saying this was an oral creed transmitted to Paul. That's the summary.
From eyewitnesses.
Thank you.
From eyewitnesses.
Yes. Crucifixion. Salam, brother.
From eyewitnesses.
Yeah. So my point is, crucifixion is a very well-attested historical rumor. That's my stance. I don't have a problem being well-attested rumor, but it's not the reality. What you are saying, you have evidence for it. So where is the contemporary first-hand evidence? Instead you're saying it's a creedal, oral creed passed on. Now, when you have an oral creed passing on, we're talking about transmission. When something is transmitted from one individual to the other, you need to connect that they met each other, for example, they've heard each other from, and also the person that is being transmitted to. Peter transmits to Paul. Is Paul trustworthy? Did he have a good memory? Was he honest? Was he a man of integrity? These needs to be established, first of all, because Paul is hearing from them through oral transmission. Yeah? Okay. My 4 questions was...
Stick to one question. Stick to one.
One question, which is for part A, B, and C. One question. Okay. Paul's integrity, right? Was Paul one with a good memory, so he recollects exactly what was told to him, translated to him. Was he an honest individual? Did he ever lie? Did he never lie or deceive? Okay, and was he man of a character, good character? Before you say, I take Paul's testimony, we need to test him, whether he's reliable and trustworthy. So provide all this evidence before you move on to the next stage.
Yes.
So,
Nothing to do with the Quran now. Only stick to the question.
So Galatians chapter 1 verse 18. Paul says that he went and stayed with Cephas, and the word there he uses is historisterai, which means to be acquainted with knowledge. It is a historical fact which all biblical scholars affirm that the disciples of Jesus literally, which your Quran, by the way, calls Muslims, I don't know how, literally believed in Jesus' crucifixion. So we have the testimony of the disciples of Jesus. We also have Mark's Gospel. Mark's Gospel is the memoirs of the Apostle Peter, who recited, and then his amanuensis Peter wrote this down. So Peter, the Gospel of Mark, which comes from Jesus' disciple Peter, talks about the crucifixion of Jesus. Let me ask you a question. Can you provide any historical evidence that Jesus was not crucified?
Yes, the question.
Yes, I will provide.
Can I ask you a question before all this happened? Because I was standing, you
but
interrupted.
Right.
Ijaz, I'm debating.
Ijaz, look.
No.
When I was intervening, so you tell him, I am going to... No. You can debate, look, you can discuss Ijaz. You can discuss Ijaz. I'll be happy for you to discuss Ijaz. But the one question I asked, enough of the introduction, I'm giving you a chance again. Can you answer the question that I asked? Then we move on.
Brother,
just have.
Let Mansour finish.
What is the questions I asked? Can you remind him about Paul?
The reliability of Paul.
So he's saying,
The reliability of Paul.
Yes.
The reliability of
That
Paul.
he has a good memory. He was an honest man, never lies, never deceives. He's a good character and man of integrity.
If we're going to take Paul seriously.
Yes, thank you.
We don't need to run in commentary.
I think we do. It helps.
Okay. We have excellent church tradition that the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter died as brothers in arms in Rome. And so Peter accepted Paul as a legitimate disciple of Jesus. So Peter, who was a disciple of Jesus, accepted Paul as a man of good honor, as a man of good integrity. Why should we doubt him? And if we pay into the same standards, the main narrator in your Quran, the Hafs Quran, is a guy called Hafs bin Sulaiman. According to your own Islamic scholars, Hafs bin Sulaiman was a liar and a thief who fabricated things against the Messenger of Allah. And Muhammad himself, the Prophet of Allah, also fabricated things against Allah by saying about the three goddesses.
What's your name, by the way? Ruslan. Sorry to stop you there. I'm
just holding you to your own standard.
No. Look, it's not about standard. First of all, when you talk about like compared to Islamic traditions and histories, without having knowledge of these, obviously, clearly, you just heard something from someone. Listen, you're regurgitating out. I am simply asking you to stick to the topic, which obviously clearly you aren't. Every opportunity that you're responding,
I'm just applying.
Excuse me, Ruslan, you're all the same. Speak as Quran, you're all the same. You have to somehow insult the Prophet, insult Islam, and mockery, and so on and so forth. Now that's become your trademark.
One of your caliphs insulted the gods of the pagans. So what's wrong with that?
Ruslan, I'm talking. So it's become your trademark, right? Your trademark. So maybe that's how you'll be known in the future. This is how Christians are in their behavior. You know, the only thing that you need to change is this, the approach that you're using. So I asked you about Paul's integrity, then I'm going to give over to Ijaz, because Ijaz nodded his head when you said...
But I was talking to you...
Listen. Speak to people of knowledge. Hang on. You can ask him as many questions.
You're very intelligent.
I'm talking about knowledge. I'm not talking about intelligence. Don't you realize?
Are you not knowledgeable, man?
Excuse me. I'm saying on this topic, I am saying speak to someone who knows. But the question I asked you about Paul's reliability, you're saying they died together with each other, Peter and Paul, or something like this. I said, do you have anything to corroborate, testify that he was a man possessor of good memory? Obviously you haven't got anything given me so far yet. I've asked this question so many times. Good memory. Not being dishonest, always being honest and of good character and integrity. You haven't given me anything. Because we know the contrary. When Paul says, to a Jew I'm a Jew, To a Gentile, I'm a
That's not what
Gentile.
it means.
Hang on. Let me speak.
Paul said we do not use deception.
Excuse me. Look, when he says to a Jew, I'm a Jew, to a low person who's a by the way, a low person, and so on and so forth, it's very clear what it means. You will twist it away from its rightful context. So, where is your character witness for Paul? Once you answer that, I am happily handing over to Ijaz, who's knowledgeable in the subject, and you can discuss, because he said he doesn't agree with you what you just said.
Initially talking with you, now you're handing it over.
Initially wanted to
And
talk
I don't
to...
want to debate with you with all due respect for my own reasons. I'll tell you why if the audience wants to hear.
You can say it outright as well, but I know this topic very well, and what you said was incorrect.
Speak up, please.
But the thing is, you say it's incorrect.
That's how he
For
speaks.
example,
I'll give you an
he
example.
made,
He needs to speak up.
he made a video.
Why do you say it's incorrect? Should we let low? Why do you say it's
He made a
incorrect?
video that was published on his channel, EF Dawah, called something, The Textual Transmission of the New Testament, or something like that, part 1. And this video was analysed by a Christian apologist by the name of Keith Thompson.
Is that true?
Ijaz Ahmed, in that talk, said, and I quote, he was trying to discredit Petrine authorship of the epistles. And he said, we have a New Testament scholar called Professor Marcus Bockmuir, who is a conservative scholar, and he used those words as if this is a guy who's a conservative scholar, not a liberal scholar, and comes to the conclusions that the two epistles weren't written by Paul. Keith Thompson actually emailed Professor Marcus Bockmuir and asked him, have you ever identified as a conservative scholar? He says, no, I was never identified as a conservative. So with all due respect, and this is just one out of a plethora of lies which you used in that, so that's why I don't feel comfortable with you. Because one thing, I know you're very knowledgeable, but the problem with your knowledge, you can twist things. And I've only been studying this for a limited amount of time.
Defend your honor now.
Not everybody.
Subhanallah, he says he will not debate me because I'm a liar, and I'm a liar because I described a man as conservative and he wasn't. If that's the greatest lie you can give, then I'm a saint.
It's still a lie.
It's
still a lie. It's still a lie.
Substantive.
Give me something more substantive.
But your argument is Paul wasn't untrustworthy, so if you've been proven to be untrustworthy, he has the right to then not engage with your comments.
Yeah, but that's the one small
No,
thing.
it doesn't matter how small it is. He wouldn't be.
He was making a point. We have
Let him talk.
Let him defend his point. He said a lot of things.
I can answer that accusation very easily. Wallahi, I got that book recommendation from a New Testament scholar who is a conservative from the New Orleans Baptist.
I don't even
Shut up,
believe you. You see, shut up to me, man.
Because look at your face.
Look at your face.
Look at your face. Camera in his face.
He's calling me a
Hate
liar.
in your face.
So let me
You are a
correct
liar.
you. Let me correct you. So I got it from a scholar, New Testament scholar, published by Brill on the New Testament from the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. He recommended that book to me.
And he says he's a
let me finish.
conservative.
Let me do. Come on, right? And in that message he sent to me, he described Marcus Bockmuir as a conservative scholar, and he himself was a conservative scholar. So I trusted a Christian, and I was wrong. I will not make that mistake again. No, you said you
What are
don't.
the other things that...
Right, so what are the other? Hold on, no.
He said that-
hold on,
Plethora. Plethora was the word he used.
Something more
no, hold
substantive.
on. I'll make this easy for you. You just made claims about the New Testament, its transmission, about Mark, Matthew, Peter, Paul. So I call you a liar for what you have said, because I could prove you wrong publicly with evidence in front of you. So are you here to defend what you've just said, or are you a coward and you will run? It's very simple. I put the proposition to you.
I'll defend what I said.
Let's defend it. Make your claim again. Make it again.
I've already
No,
I've
make it
made it
point by
about 3
point.
times.
Make it point
Make
by
it a bit
point.
bigger so we all listen.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
enjoyable
Let's make a
hopefully.
circle.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be more.
Circular friendship. Let's all hug and kiss. Right.
That tune's gone.
Oh,
You're safe now.
Allahu Akbar. Right.
Nicely.
Right, so make the first point.
Sexual predators and shit.
I want us to go point by point because I'm not going to do Muslim run and like do all the topics.
Nicely.
Make one point, I'll shut up, I will shut up and you can tell me to shut up. Speak for 2 minutes, make your point, we'll time it. Can someone time it?
Yeah, I can time it, yeah?
Right.
Sorry, don't need time.
No, we need time because this is
Just on the crucifixion.
anything you want.
Anything you
but
want.
you were speaking about crucifixion, so I would rather address it. Yes? And go to a second one just to be clear to you. Because you did insist upon it. Can you time it?
You time.
You can time it as well.
He insisted on time earlier on. Just a bit childish sometimes.
Okay, who's going to start?
No,
Who's going to start
Let's start
first?
from zero.
He's going to make his claim, isn't he?
I'm not biased.
Don't worry, you're not biased. Don't worry, he's a good man.
You got my water?
Yes, I have it.
Oh, I love it.
Bro, I know you're in it. Just back it up a little bit so we've got a bit.
Open up a bit more, boys.
Okay, let's open
Not
up.
too much, because if you use like the base water, we'll be over there.
And yes, Sidawa as well, which is recording.
Okay, who's going to start?
Yeah. Oh, where's the other one?
1 minute, 1 minute to
Oh my God.
Is it 1 minute or 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, 2 minutes?
Greenwich Mean Time, man. No, Saudi Arabian time.
SC Dara will share the footage.
Are we ready?
Wait,
Fake news, SC Dawa.
Are we ready?
Are you ready?
It's a new debate. What's going on?
We're going to start first.
Yeah?
Okay,
You're going to start, huh?
no one talk.
No, it's the timer.
Yeah, I'm going to start.
Go!
So, what I was going to say, first of all,
What are you doing? Look, if you want to talk, that's fine.
No, man.
Don't step in front of
Stop.
I'm going to restart.
Yeah, but don't step in front of the camera on purpose, bro. You've been doing that over there as well.
Guys,
No, come on. It's about the debate now.
Ruslan, some room, please.
Okay.
Go!
So the crucifixion of Jesus is the most well-established fact of ancient antiquity, as stated by 99.9%. I can't even think of a person, a historian, that says the crucifixion of Jesus isn't a fact. And the only people that do say it's a fact is people who believe that Jesus never existed, and people who say that Jesus never existed, they're a fringe minority of a minority which the mainstream doesn't take seriously. My point is that the disciples of Jesus Christ, which your Quran calls Muslims, believed and buried Jesus' dead body in the tomb. So we have attestation by the disciples of Jesus, which your Quran calls good Muslims, that somehow preserved the message of Jesus, which they actually didn't. That's evidence. Evidence number two, we have a parable which even liberal scholars of the Jesus seminar believe is a historical thing, which the Jesus of Nazareth actually quoted. That's the parable of the vineyard, where Jesus says that he will be killed. So Jesus is prophesying his own death. So we have Jesus prophesying his own death. We have the attestation of Jesus' disciples. We have the attestation of Roman historians, of Jewish historians, of Jesus' enemies. Tacitus hated Christians. If he wanted to, he could have shut these pesky Christians up. Because Christians in the first century were saying, look, Jesus died for our sins. Tacitus hated Christians. And if he wanted to, he could have said, no, this is actually a lie. But he never says anything, because he knew, as a historian who did his proper historical work, that the death of Jesus is 100% true within a historical context. So the only reason why you reject this is based on a book written 600 years after that time by a man who was, by his own admission, was under a black magic curse which gave him sexual delusions of him having sex with imaginary woman. This is the reason why you reject the crucifixion, because of what that man said.
Stop. I'm going to hold it.
I lost.
Yeah?
Go, you go.
I asked him to make his point, and he gave us 3 evidences historically for the crucifixion. The first he gave was testimony from the disciples. You have no testimony from the disciples, nothing extant to the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd century CE. Let me make this point very easily. He claimed that Mark was the scribe of Peter. Who does he get this from? He gets it from Papias or Papias, whatever you call him. But Papias also says that Mark was written out of order. You read Mark today, which is the gospel that's out of order?
You were immortal before. Ask for forgiveness.
I'm his brother.
Secondly, you appeal to the vineyard statement, which is an early creedal statement, right? We know that's false, but he explained why. That understanding is based on what we call liberal scholarship. Under liberal scholarship, piece of literature and you break it up into authorial profiles. You look for trends in the way that people speak and write. So what they have done is they have acknowledged that there were many editors to the text of Paul. And then because there were many editors, they traced the language to be the most primitive in that specific place. So if you're going to argue that this creed or this faith was early, then you don't understand how philology works. You can argue it's early or later. All the scholars say, the philologists, is that it's different from the normal authorial faith. So they cannot determine where or when it was written. The only criteria they used to say it was early was because of the primitive language, but that does not necessarily that it is early. Anyway, the Jewish historians will argue that was 9th century, Josephus 11th and 13th. Just read the manuscripts and you'll see yourself.
This is absolutely ridiculous. He's conflating when the manuscripts come from to when they actually wrote it. Yes, we may have manuscripts of Tacitus in the 9th century, but that doesn't mean it wasn't written in the 1st century AD. And this is what you're confusing. All biblical historians on the planet today believe all 4 of the Gospels were written between 30 to 60 years after the time of Jesus. And according to scholars like Professor Richard Bowcombe, Mark's Gospel was based on Peter's testimony. Peter was a disciple of Jesus. The book of Galatians, which no historian, well, not that I know of, even Bart Ehrman accepts, Galatians chapter 1 verse 18 is an authentic passage of Paul, and Paul is saying that he met the disciples of Jesus that acquainted with him knowledge and told them that Jesus was crucified. So the disciples believed in Jesus' literal crucifixion. The only people who denied Jesus' crucifixion in the 1st century AD was someone who called the Gnostics. The Gnostics believed that Jesus couldn't die because he didn't have a physical body, so you can't kill something that's not physical. Jesus couldn't eat, Jesus couldn't sleep, and these are the people that believe that Jesus didn't die. But apart from that, the mainstream believe that Jesus did die on the cross. The parable of the vineyard, again, it's an interesting passage, and even liberal scholars say this is something which Jesus actually said. Also, we have Papyrus of Hierapolis, which he quoted. Why should we doubt anything?
Now you understand about Adam and
God?
God?
Where Papyrus lied or something, I don't know what you're on about. But Papyrus met John the Elder, who knew the disciples of Jesus. So we have a chain of transmission from Papyrus that goes to Jesus' disciples. We also have the testimony of Polycarp, who knew John. We also know the testimony of Ignatius of Antioch. Both Ignatius of Antioch and Polycarp were students of the Apostle John, and they both believe in Jesus' crucifixion.
Are you afraid? No, you ask a question. Let's leave it for 2 seconds. I know you're very impatient. You get answer, but can I ask you?
Yes, yes.
Then you say not my turn. Okay? Let's proceed. I ask you a question. I expect you to answer it. Let me explain again. When a person dies,
what's that thing about
the person's body perishes, earthly body, and the soul lives on either for eternity, depending on No, you did not say this at all. Now let me tell you what immortal is. Immortal is someone who never ever dies. Yes? Either physically, spiritually, whatever you want to call it. In any way, shape, or form. Immortal, that can only be God Almighty. The difference between him and God is one of the things. God is always immortal. Man is always mortal. Regardless of whether his soul lives on or not, he's still considered mortal. What is mortal? I'll tell you that mortal is the opposite of immortal. Just like immortal means not subject to death, mortal means you are subject to death. Every soul, every person, soul is death. It means that is inevitable. Even an atheist will accept this. Of course, when I talk about humans, I expect you to understand that every human is mortal, including Jesus Christ.
The point said is, are you ready? Go. So his first point was Galatians 1:18 verse 10. Again, I bring you back. I'm not asking you for conclusions of others, right? Because if you were just to adopt the conclusions of others and the earth is flat and the sun is inside the dome, I'm not going to do that, right? What is upon us is that we must judge the evidence that lead to the conclusions. We are not a people just to take conclusions. So I'm putting it towards you. The philologists say because the text is different from the normal Pauline style of writing, it means that it's from a different author. So you have to make the concession with the philologists. You said Galatians 1:18 and the other one that you mentioned as well. I get to the vineyard, right? So I'm putting it forward to you. If you're going to accept the conclusions of the philologists, if you're going to accept the conclusions of the philologists, then you must accept the presumption of the science, which is that the New Testament books weren't written by one author, but by multiple anonymous editors. So if you're going to appeal to that, then you can follow through on your argument. Second, so I can go to the date of the excellent manuscript of the authorship before the Catholic and Josephus. No, I didn't expand my argument fully, but it's simple. You can't appeal to, I never said it was in the first century book, but I'm saying to you the version that exists today is from 900 years later. You said earlier to Mansour, how can you accept the Quran 600 years later? But you wouldn't accept Tacitus from 900 years later. Same thing with Josephus 11th and 13th century. You said that Tacitus to different things against the Christians. We don't know what the original is. Yeah, you don't know what your originally transmitted. So textual criticism needs to be done to that. And in any case, the end conclusion was the oratorial prophet. Lastly, you said Polycarp was a student of John. How we know this is false is that Polycarp never once quotes the Gospel of John, and he never said which John he met. He just said he met a John. It could be John the Presbyter, it could be John the Elder, John of Patmos. We don't actually know historically. That's it.
He is the one who basically gave out of
2 seconds, Ron. Go.
and because of her, we sin. Alright. He is the one who blamed really. That's why he blamed the sin that was basically the main sin. Because of which all of humanity, according to your narration, everybody sinned.